So to remove the spot welds from the MGB foot floor, very time consuming job, we use a drill with a wire brush so we can clearly identify them. You can see a couple there. Then using the spot weld drill, positioned as accurately as possible, we're going to I think it's just gone. So we removed the back section of the floor across to the cross member. Make sure you take off all the clips that hold the wire and the fuel line, brake lines, etc. We've actually disconnected the fuel line on this car for safety. And then work your way forward. Keep drilling, grinding. It's a very long process. This car's actually had a badly welded plate in here, so we've had to slice across here because it was seam welded, and obviously there's no drilling that out. And then just keep going, and this is the next section that I've been able to remove. It takes us a bit further. Now we can see the true extent of this cross member, so we're just cutting away parts of the central beam that joins the chassis, just to find out how much of the chassis we can save. It looks pretty good. The end of the chassis looks like it's going to be usable, so it's only the central beam that may need to be replaced. So we've now cut everything away from the chassis there, and so the cross member is, a large part of this cross member is now missing, and we can still see the original folds in the metal of the chassis at the end, so I think that's pretty much okay. It doesn't look too bad. The bottom of the chassis at the very end has clearly been welded badly, and we're going to have to find out how thick that metal is there, so that all needs to be cleaned up to see whether we can actually salvage that part, that last end, that part of the chassis, or whether we need to replace it. Now that we've removed some of the plug welds from this section here of the bell housing onto the central member, this side is now released. We've still got the other side to do. So after careful consideration, I decided to work on the other side. So I have removed the seat now, and I'm just exposing the beam on the other side, the cross member, and we're going to be taking this out so that we can replace the whole beam as one, and without having to turn the car around. So nearly all the way through the central bar, we're going to need to try and split it at some point and then take it out from the other side, so we can pop in the new one. So as you can see, you need to cut quite a large section of the floor away, and ideally if you removed the exhaust it would have been a lot easier, but what I did is I just loosened it and put the beam in on the angle. So now you can see it's lining up with the chassis here, which when we remove that section of the floor we'll be able to weld that on properly. Obviously this height, or this lip here, has all been cut away, but this is the correct height for there. This is now matching up with the bulkhead, and again with the bulkhead on this side, matching up with the chassis, and finishing up with on the new seal. So for some reason when you buy the cross member they don't actually give you the plate that goes across the centre under the gearbox. So I've just cut a plate out, punched some plug weld holes in it, and I'll weld that on in a minute. It's all been covered in weld through spray. So that's the central plate welded onto the central member, so it can now be fitted to the car. So this is the passenger's side of the chassis, and I've just torn away a little bit more of the floor so that we can clean up the end, which I've just done, so that we can weld on the central beam. So just another quick update on the cross member. We found that the distance between the cross members was different to the cross member beam, whereupon they've got a double thickness of material over these sections. They were coming past the chassis leg, so I sliced slightly a little bit off the chassis leg, and then I measured between them and found that they were actually put on unevenly, not the chassis legs but the double thickness material on this side and the other side, and this side was quite far out, so I actually had to cut a little bit of the cross member away on the double skin on the outside. It was only about 5mm, but it was enough to stop it fitting properly. So now that that has been adapted to how it should be, hopefully we've just got to clean up the central tunnel where the gearbox is, where the spot welds will be, and we'll be able to clamp it all in properly and then weld it in. I've also put on, you probably see, a couple of plug holes here and here, just for ease of putting it in, and there's one here and here on the other side. I'm actually going to put one down here and possibly one on this side. This is one of the sides I had to thin of the chassis, so maybe not, but the idea is to weld on the inside, of this section here, rather than on the tabs that are bent back. So the tabs that are bent back will have a spot weld in each, but the main weld will be on the inside. Right, it was bothering me that the bottom of the tab of the chassis was missing, so we're going to put on a piece of metal there to match the other side, and it also means that we can drill down in the bottom of the central member, and we can then spot weld onto this bracket, the same as we can do on the other side as well. So an additional fixing. Right, so it's all lined up now. On this side, we probably have to do the other side slightly differently, but it's all ready for plug welding now. So that's now been welded in place. Plug welds, and also we did a weld inside the chassis on the bottom. Obviously the top doesn't necessarily need to be quite as strong, because the floor is going to be on that, and you'd need to pull the floor apart in order to come apart. So we've done that side and temporarily done the other side. We haven't been able to do inside the chassis yet, but when the car's turned around we'll be able to do that, and obviously when we change the seal on the other side that will all match up. I've also coated the inside of the cross member and the chassis leg with a very thick coat of hammerite. Black. We're just threading through the cables and the petrol line and the brake line through the central rubber, and we're going to bolt that up and then make sure everything is nice and straight, make sure that the pipes reach their destination, and then connect them up.